Okay. Okay, let's open in a word of prayer. Lord, thank you so much for this day. We pray that you bless our time together today as we discuss some pretty significant topics in Bible prophecy. Bless us today. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, apologize for the late start. Of course, I had one video that I wanted to add, and of course, it didn't seem to want to cooperate at the last minute. But, and the reason we're doing it early today is we have a special event that is scheduled for the time when I would usually do the update. So let's get started. So today I'm going to call this Operation Gaslighting. It's clear that in this world, we live in a very postmodern world where everybody sort of adopts a narrative and then pulls the facts in to support whatever it is that they want to support. And we'll see a number of things this week. Now, I did an update the other night after the Trump verdict, and I'm going to repeat a little bit of that today. But if you want to watch it in more detailed and rambling fashion than today, you can go to the video that I put up the other night and listen to that, because I don't have time to go into all of those issues. But I think it's very important. And I do think it's important from a Bible prophecy standpoint, because we live at this time in the world where, as I've noted, we have acceleration, convergence, logistics, and understanding. And you're going to see a lot of changes this is a year, historically unprecedented year of elections in the world, let alone the United States and elsewhere. The UK is going to elections very soon. They called for early elections. India is finishing up elections. I think Argentina had elections earlier this year. So everywhere you look, there are elections taking place. There are elections coming up for the EU that are pretty important in terms of how that region fits or may fit into Bible prophecy. We've had a leader of Iran die, Raisi. And by the way, I don't even have time to play for you today. Do you know what they did at the UN for Raisi? They actually had like an hour-and-a-half tribute to this butcher, the guy who's called the Butcher of Tehran. And I apologize, I think in the past I've referred to him as the Butcher of Baghdad. That was a different butcher. But the Butcher of Tehran. Antonio Guterres, the head of the UN, got up and praised what a great statesman and diplomat this man was. He was a butcher. He is a monster. Now, he's kind of a low-level functionary, but you're seeing this change taking place. Israel might be on the verge of elections again. The last ones took place about a year and a half ago. And it's everywhere you look, these things are happening, and they're tremendous change. And so there's leaders being raised up in the world that if we're at the time where these things are going to unfold quickly, then these leaders are very significant, as we see. And again, when we talk about this convergence of events and we talk about the fact that as we get closer to the end, we're going to have a little bit better understanding of how those things work out. The why shall understand. And I really do think that is a passage that we're seeing, that we see is having application in our time. And again, I use this as an example of my view of the horse is that the seals open, but they progress, get intense over time. Now, I may have the white one a little bit wrong, and I actually think these are, increasingly, I think these are the foundation of the final beast empire, these horsemen. And so the white one may peak a little bit sooner than I have it peaking. And then again, we have the scroll, and we have the seals and the trumpets. So today I'm going to talk about I'll just talk about a few extraneous things that I think are important. One of the things that's happening with AI and technology, and I did an AI technology transhumanism roundtable with Patrick Wood, Scott Townsend, and Britt Gillette on Wednesday. That's up on our YouTube channel. It might also be on Britt's YouTube channel. And we just sort of talked about what's going on. And there's been this rapid development in AI. And I'm not so sure that AI is it. There's a lot of problems with AI. But the more important part of that is the development of the technology and the speed of the development of the technology and how that's impacting all sorts of different areas. One of the problems, though, with technology, development of technology, is we don't have enough electricity for all the server farms that they're building around the world. And that's a problem. And so the people in AI, for example, Microsoft has taken the nuclear regulatory construction guidelines, principles, laws, regulations, and they're feeding them into AI so that they can cut that nuclear electricity generating plant down to a few, from like 6 or 7 years to just maybe under a year. And they need that because they need the power. And so Microsoft is actively involved in trying to build nuclear power plants near these things, because solar and wind are not going to do it. They don't work. If they work 25 or 30% of the time, that's a generous estimate. And then we have all the battery that people need. And we have a lack of rare earth metals, particularly lithium. But now this is an interesting story. This is from Science Alert. A vast untapped source of lithium has been found in the U.S. So what's the U.S. been doing? We're probably the world leader in fracking to get gas, natural gas. Well, that requires a lot of water. In fact, they're building a big chip plant out here. That's going to require a lot of water. And then the question comes, is that water going to come from? And for all I know, they have a direct pipeline that they're building from Lake Erie down here to these chip plants. But all of these servers, they require cooling. Just like that was always a big problem with Bitcoin, because they use massive computing centers. And the concern was that Bitcoin would grow so big that it would soon consume 30 or 40% of the world's power generation. Well, that concern is even greater with regard to the server farms and cloud computing and all these things associated with artificial intelligence and tech development. But in the groundwater that's used to do the fracking, you have to inject water into the earth to crack the rock. Now they're finding that water is rich in lithium. So it's a byproduct that somebody's going to make a lot of money off of. So the fracking companies, I'm sure they're meeting with their scientists and business people to get this thing done. It's very interesting. Another thing that happened, and we've talked about change in leadership in Iran, potentially in Israel, potentially in Europe, potentially in the United States and the UK and many other places. Klaus Schwab has announced he's going to step down as the executive chairman of the World Economic Forum. So a lot of people go, oh, well, maybe the World Economic Forum is going to change their focus. No, they're not. They're going to double down. He's going to still be involved, and his family's involved. So they released this statement. It says, since 2015, the World Economic Forum has been transforming from a convening platform to the leading global institution for public-private cooperation. As a part of that transformation, the organization has also been undergoing a planned governance evolution from a founder-managed organization to one where the president and managing board assume full executive responsibility. And so by January 2025, Schwab will not be the CEO. He'll still be on the board. And it's interesting, if you look at the board that they have, some of these guys, this is the board of the World Economic Forum. Yo-Yo Ma, the cellist. There was somebody else I had down here. Al Gore. I mean, we're all glad about that, right? that he keeps himself busy with something else like world domination. Christine Lagarde, the president of the European Central Bank. Also, look there to the right of Christine Lagarde, you have Queen Rania Al Abdullah, the queen of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, which is interesting. But understand that the Hashemite family that runs Jordan is pretty wealthy. I researched this a couple years ago, and I believe that the estimate that the people who had some knowledge of what they control, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, the Hashemite family generates between $1 and $2 billion a year in earnings on their portfolio. That's pretty wealthy. Another person here's Larry Fink. And we've seen I have some clips of him. I'll play those in the future. They had a big World Economic Forum conference in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia a few weeks ago, where they talked a lot about central bank digital currencies. What do we do with declining populations? How does AI fit into that? And Fink had some interesting comments. I'll just give you a quick preview. He said, when you're in a country with declining population, you're actually going to do better because you'll be able to increase your productivity. You have less people, but AI and technology will allow you to increase productivity. So we really will be able to get by with less people, I think he was saying. And then, of course, Chrystia Freeland, who is the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance of Canada, is on there. And we saw a lot of her during the pandemic. I saw a old video of Jacinda Ardern, who was the Prime Minister of New Zealand, talking back during the Charlie Vector 019er situation. And she was saying, we will be the sole source of your information. If you don't hear from us, don't trust it. Everything else is disinformation. To which somebody who had, in response to that tweet, said, how did that all work out? It's not going very well for them. So Catherine Austin Fitts, she's a pretty good commentator on financial things. She weighed in on, do you think that Klaus Schwab leaving the World Economic Forum is significant? Here's what she had to say.
Yeah, so what this says is our risk levels just went up. So it's not good, it's the this is not good, it's the opposite. And we're seeing this in many positions across the establishment, Polly. We're seeing, I call it the hitman cometh. They're moving either someone like Schwab into a behind-the-scenes role where he can work more effectively on big moves. So he's not leaving. He's putting his wife as the public face, and then he's going into the back room to sort of engineer things. And of course, as I said, all of this is subject to the approval of the Swiss government, which tells you who's really in control. And I would say it's the Bank of International Settlements in Basel. But be that as it may, we are watching positions all across Europe and the United States being, the last guy's being moved out and a new guy's being moved in. And we just did it on Money and Markets. I called it the hitman cometh. So this is not good news. It's bad news. They are building up to another big move. We really see that by the head of the UK calling for a general election. There are rumors that the current PM does not want to be a wartime PM, and they're going to move in somebody who basically is a member of the Trilateral Commission, I think, who is happy to be a wartime leader. So don't celebrate this. This is not a good look.
No.
Okay, so that's interesting comments, and I think she's right. And we sometimes, we talked about this at the Prophecy Roundtable we did the other night about the significance of the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland. It's very important, very powerful institution, and as things move more digital, it's only going to become more so. So here's Trump convicted. So let me just make a few comments on this. And this is where the postmodern aspect of our culture comes in, I think, even in the Christian community. So if you don't like Trump, you got every fact that you could ever want. I mentioned in my update, I think that there are issues with former President Trump that I'm not comfortable with, things that he supports, galas that he holds at Mar-a-Lago. I think he's backing off on abortion issue. That his appointed justices gave us a perfect opportunity to put in restrictions on that, which I think would be good. But he was convicted. And this is a big deal. So, for example, right now, as a convicted felon, he was convicted on 34 out of 34 charges. I'm a lawyer. That doesn't happen very often. The jury can come in, the jury can compromise. This jury came back with 34 out of 34 guilty verdicts. And for each guilty verdict, they had to fill out a form. Now, the judge, who I think is incredibly corrupt, he's donated to Biden, he's donated to anti-Republican organizations. He clearly should have recused himself. And there have been 3 pretty significant cases involving Trump. In most courts, when you file a case, you go into the clerk's office, and the clerk will, sometimes they'll pull a card out, or they'll have a pack of things that are sealed, and they'll peel the top one off, and that will tell you the judge that you get. And amazingly, in a randomly assigned system where the cases are randomly assigned to different judges, this guy ended up with all 3 significant cases. Have him buy your lottery tickets, I guess, is what you would say if he's that lucky. And I think this was a put-up job. So Trump is now convicted. There are at least 37 countries that even I think as president of the United States that he cannot travel to, including the UK, I think Ireland, maybe Canada. We are really in uncharted, unprecedented territory. We don't know how this is going to play out. I think people on the Republican side are hopeful that Trump will be elected again, but the final poll will be in November. That's the one that counts, and all the other stuff is sort of fluff that you can argue about until that actually happens. But look at the way, and I think the way that this is being presented has a significant aspect to it. So this is New York Post, Ottawa Sun. So if you don't like Trump, you got everything you ever want to talk about till he passes away or he leaves public life and he's put in prison. If you like Trump, you can say, he was railroaded, this was injustice, you have everything that you want to argue. I know people who think that Donald Trump is the Antichrist. Now, I don't hold to that view. I take a very open mind on people who claim that so-and-so is the Antichrist because, well, one, nobody knows. And I'm all for people making their argument, but what I don't like, so I came out and I'm totally against the process that went on in New York. I think it's very dangerous. If they'll do it to Trump, a pretty wealthy businessman, former president, they'll do it to you in a heartbeat. And their heart rate won't go up a bit when they do it to you. So when I said that I take him out of the equation is the best way to do this. And what happened is a travesty of justice. It's really the death of the American justice system right in front of our eyes. I don't think how you can describe it any other way. And so I said that, and somebody said, "Oh, you're defending unrighteousness." People, that's a good way to get you blocked and banned from our channel if you make such ridiculous comments. I'm not defending unrighteousness, okay? I'm looking at the implications of what happened. Look at this. This is the New Yorker. Trump being led away in handcuffs. But do you see the imagery here? That it's not just Trump in handcuffs. What is it, Trump? It's Trump with very tiny hands. Because that has a lot, because some of the comments that he's made. Time magazine here on the right, they've used this kind of cartoon thing of Trump ever since he was elected. The Storm, if you remember all these covers, that's the one that he has now. He's been flat So here's the New York Times, I think this morning. The path ahead is unclear after his guilty verdict. Democrats press for focus on the felonies. Experts say appeals face long odds. I would agree with that. So this was a state court conviction. He has to appeal it to state appellate court in New York, based in New York City, and then maybe up to the Supreme Court. I seriously doubt that he gets that overturned in New York courts. That process could take a year or more, just that process. Then he would have the ability to appeal federal constitution, and he has to exhaust all those appeals in New York. So he may have to go 2 court levels. Let's just say it takes a year and a half. So where are we now? We're in early 2026, which would be a year after whoever is going to get sworn in 2025 is sworn in. There's a possibility he could go to prison under New York state guidelines. This is the lowest level felony that they have, but he could get 4 years in prison. Now, do you think that the judge who did the things to him in that case, for example, they never told him he was charged with falsifying records to further a crime. They never specified what the crime was. You're not allowed to do that. It's called due process. And if you don't see that, you don't understand the law. Now, you can understand how it was manipulated by the Democrats in New York in an egregious fashion. But Trump wanted to bring in an election law expert. By the way, the statute of limitations on the federal election law violations has run. So what they did was they had to kind of, sort of like a Rube Goldberg type jury-rigging thing together to get it to work and to avoid the bar of the statute of limitations on those claims. And Trump wanted to bring in an expert, election law expert, to say, hey, this is not an election law violation. People are allowed to pay money to keep people quiet. It's part of the system. Whether you agree with it or not, the underlying conduct or anything, you're allowed to do that. People sign non-disclosure agreements all the time. I myself am subject to non-disclosure agreements on settlements that I negotiated. Cases I was involved in. I can't talk about. I can't talk about what happened. I can't talk about the settlement. This is very, very common. The judge wouldn't let him bring in that election law expert. He barred it. I think he allowed the prosecution to bring in an expert. This was for lack of a better term, a trumped up charge, trumped up case. So he could go to prison. And they're already the Secret Service people that are charged with his protection for the rest of his life are already meeting with prison officials in New York City and prisons in New York about how they would manage the protection of Trump if he was put in prison. This is stuff that happens in third world countries. Somebody posted a picture of the U.S. flag with, instead of the field of stars, it had bananas, and they turned it upside down. I thought that was an appropriate situation that we're in. We really are in unprecedented territory. He will not get a pardon. He would have to get a pardon from the governor of New York. If he was elected president, he could not pardon himself. So I don't know what odds I would get at this felony conviction being in place for the rest of his life. My guess, so I'm a lawyer and we're kind of pathologists, so sometimes we talk about the bad things that we see. I think there's a greater than 50-50 chance that this case does not go away, even if he gets into a federal court. This is uncharted territory. Prison time, travel restrictions. Now, Jonathan Turley, a very good professor of law I think he's either at Georgetown or George Washington. He wrote an article at The Hill today about, the thrill kill in Manhattan could prove short-lived on a pill. And he has all kinds of reasons as to why the conviction won't stand. But again, you need to watch the imagery of what's used. See the imagery of the Sunday opinion piece today in the New York Times? Columns, government, but bars. Very significant. Alexander Soros, who's taking over from his father, said Democrats should refer to Trump as a convicted felon at every opportunity. Repetition is the key to a successful message, and we want people to wrestle with the notion of hiring a convicted felon for the most important job in the country. Now, by the way, this is another tweet that Alexander Soros put up. Remember the kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs, who I agree with a lot of what he said, but understand he's Catholic, and I have a lot of issues with that. But see, this Butker's and misogyny is not unique. It's the conservative agenda. That's another article at The Hill. By the way, his new girlfriend is Huma Abedin, the confidant of Hillary Clinton. And her parents, she worked for a Muslim Brotherhood publication, Sharia publication. This is an article from The Hill, by the way, back in 2016. And I saw a picture of her and her new boyfriend, Alex. She's still married to that former congressman, Anthony Weiner, whatever his name was. And I think they have a child, but she's now dating Alexander Soros. They're out on the town. But there's a picture of Hillary and Soros and this guy who is a Clear Care Council on American Islamic Relations, a clear terrorist organization, having a little party and get together with Hillary Clinton. But I want you to see the imagery on this cover, The Economist. Okay, now, so what do you see in this picture? Well, first is the question, is America dictator-proof? You see a statue of Julius Caesar holding a flag. But what's the story that we know about Julius Caesar? Julius Caesar was assassinated by Brutus on the Ides of March. Famous Shakespeare play. You're going to see this theme repeated. And so, yeah, I'm concerned that former President Trump's life is at risk after all of this. The other thing that they're doing too right now is there are cases pending in the United States that relate to things that happened during the Trump administration that are working their way through the appeal process to come up to the United States Supreme Court. And what are they doing? There is a concerted campaign. Believe me, it is a campaign unlike anything I've ever seen. So Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was a feminist, pro-abortion eugenicist, she was allowed to sit on abortion cases. And you could question whether that was right, but now here's Alito and Clarence Thomas, and they're trying to get them recused because their wives did something that supported conservative agenda. And here's Jamie Raskin, this lunatic, that's not him, but this lunatic congressman from Maryland. I think he was a law professor, and he's saying, oh, no, I got the wrong. I must have missed the article. Raskin wrote a big 2-page opinion piece in the New York Times this morning about how Alito needs to go. And the one thing that I want to see, he says, is I want to see Alito out of here. Both Alito and Thomas. That will show that the judicial system is something that you can trust in the United States. But here's the Republicans. Republicans in crucial races are softening their stances on abortion. Democrats bet on abortion issue to win back the House, and the Republicans are backing off on this. I'm concerned about it, and I'm not sure that God would bless this. So that's that. So let's look at Middle East, and I have some limited time this morning. this sort of Middle East chessboard, and things are being moved around all over the place. And you could put like exploding chess pieces and topple chess pieces, but they're all sort of lining up against Israel in the Middle East. So I'll talk about some of the things going on there. Let me see here. A lot of stuff going on in Russia, Ukraine. I may come back to that. Okay, so here's some things going on. Middle East, Israel, its enemies, people lining up, and it appears that we'll get to that in just a moment. So look at this meeting. So for over a decade, Assad has been persona non grata among Arab countries in the Middle East. And it's interesting, as the Assyrian civil war ramped up and Syria was torn apart, who benefited from that? Question, answer, Iran. Because why? Iran moved into that space to take over and put its militias and weapons factories and weapons storage facilities all over Syria. And Hezbollah also helped set up militia groups through there. So he went to see Khamenei this week. There you see Raisi. They're going to have elections in the next probably 35, 40 days. By the way, somebody threw his hat in the ring, a guy named Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who he was the president of Iran for 8 years. And he was always viewed, I think, even within Iran, as kind of a crazy guy. Now, why would they allow him to be, and they don't have elections in Iran, they have elections. People argue we have the same thing here. He was selected as the president for 8 years, and I think part of that was to act as a cover to allow the regime to do some of the really evil things that the Iranian regime is prone to do. And so here's Khamenei. Everyone should witness with their own eyes the Syrian government's special value, which is the resistance. This is another thing that's happening. Iran is accused of using Sweden criminals to target Israelis. This is happening all over the place. The number of attacks on Jewish schools, Jewish synagogues, Jewish people is rising all over the world. It's very bad in Sweden. I saw pictures this week of, I think it was in Germany, a man who immediately gets described, he's a far-right nut because he opposes Islam. And this guy came and started stabbing people in a public square in Germany. I think it was in Mannheim. Guy took after him. He tackled the guy, started beating on him. And what happened? A cop came and started beating on the guy who was beating on the guy who was doing the stabbing attack. The guy got up and stabbed the policeman in the neck. Now, they eventually shot him, but people were damaged, injured quite a bit. I'm not sure where to put this in place, but this is a piece from the London Times, and then Caroline Glick. She gave a great talk about a week ago at the Israel Summit in Nashville. You can find that, by the way. It's about 36-minute talk. It's on the Israel Guys YouTube channel. It's very good, and she has this article. Since October 7th, it's become clear that Egyptian President al-Sisi has been playing Israel for a fool. And she makes a lot of really good comments here. You have this myth about Israel, that Israel's the occupier in the Middle East. And I think this is a great graphic that shows the Jewish state of Israel in the Sea of Red of Islam. Population, 440 million versus 7.5. Square miles of land, 5 million versus 0.2 million. Arab states 22, Jewish states 1. And Israel's the occupier. Israel's the focus of everything in the world. That ought to tell you that maybe what the Bible says is going to come in these end times is actually true. But back to Caroline's article. She says that at every stage of the war, from October 7th, Hamas invasion and slaughter on, al-Sisi's regime has undermined Israel's war effort in a bid to prevent the Jewish state from defeating Hamas. The motivations for Egypt's support for Hamas are still difficult to assess. However, the financial interests of al-Sisi's family appear to have been advanced significantly through the cooperation with Hamas's efforts to build tunnels across the border with Egypt. They've built this extensive tunnel system. I'm going to show you a video on that in just a moment. They've spent billions of dollars. They could have turned Gaza into the Singapore of the Middle East, or to a budding Dubai. If they had a vision, we're going to live in peace with our neighbors and we're going to develop this piece of land. And you hear these claims, they have no agriculture in Gaza. There were Jewish communities in Gaza prior to 2005, and they had these high-tech greenhouses. And I have friends who lived there, and they were forced out by the Sharon regime by pushing of the Bush administration. And they were taken up, and they left homes, they left farms, they left greenhouses. And what did Hamas do? Hamas came in and very quickly took over. They killed a lot of their political opponents. They were elected in an election. Then they went on a purge. But they destroyed these greenhouses. And now everybody's going, poor Gaza, they don't have any agriculture. But I was just down there in December of 2022 along the border. And all along the Israel side of the border are what? Agricultural farms. You're telling me that the land changes at the border fence to something that can't be tilled? No, they were supplying massive amounts of produce and citrus to Europe and elsewhere from Gaza. But Hamas is not about building something up, it's about destroying something else, and that's significant. On May 17th, Caroline says, Israel revealed that during the early stages of the Israeli military's operation to seize the international border zone between Egypt and Gaza and Rafah, the Israeli Defense Forces discovered upwards of 50 underground tunnels that traverse the border between Gaza and Egypt. The scope of the cross-border tunnel project indicates that Egyptian authorities were not merely aware of Hamas's operations, they were partners in Hamas's efforts. Starting back in February, she knows al-Sisi began a practice of repeatedly threatening to cancel Egypt's peace treaty with Israel. And it's awful. I mean, this is, so let me move over here to my video. Okay, so this is a video. It's done by a channel. It's not always 100% accurate. It's called AI Telly. They have some very interesting videos and graphics. But they do a good job showing the scope of these Hamas tunnels. So watch this.
Hamas tunnels use different tunneling methods, ranging from simple manual strategies to slightly advanced methods like forepoling and drilling blasts. They also employ reinforced concrete to support the underground structures, which are divided into approximately 7 to 8 levels called the underground metros. These tunnels are intentionally dug deep to protect against bunker buster bombs like the GBU-28, all in the video ahead, so don't miss a beat. This is how tunnels are excavated using different methods. The first method involves manual excavation with a shovel in one's own hands, while the second method represents a more advanced approach to tunnel digging. Let's now take a closer look at how each of these techniques operates. Step 1. The contractors from Hamas utilize electric or pneumatic jackhammers to drill and excavate the tunnels. Using the drill, they use forepoling as a method to temporarily support the weak roof of a mine or tunnel. This technique is traditionally used when dealing with soft, loose, or caving ground conditions. Step 2. Following the drilling process, charges or dynamite are inserted into the previously drilled holes. This step is a critical component in the tunnel construction process as it prepares the area for the next stages. Step 3. The inserted dynamite charges are then ignited, resulting in controlled explosions that create a clear path within the tunnel. Step 4. After the controlled explosions, muds and dirt are cleared from the tunnel using a pulley system. This is necessary to ensure the passage is free from mud and ready for further work. Step 5. Reinforced concrete sections, manufactured nearby, are carefully placed inside the tunnel. The construction process begins with the installation of side pillars. Following that, the arch pillars are added, further enhancing the stability and integrity of the tunnel. These concrete sections are strategically positioned, reinforcing the tunnel structure step by step. The network comprises an estimated 1,300 tunnels, spanning a total length of around 500 kilometers, which translates to 310 miles. Some of these tunnels delve as deep as 70 meters underground. Reports indicate that the majority of the tunnels are merely 2 meters high and 2 meters wide. Hamas uses levels of layers to create something called a metro. The tunnels are usually hidden within city buildings. At level 1, you will find the entrance as well as a launch pad for the Qassam rockets. Level 2 features a reinforced tunnel, which uses concrete blocks with an arc to support the structure. On level 3, the deep tunnels require oxygen for the different levels. This is one of the reasons an oxygen generator or air ventilator is needed to transfer fresh air from the surface and distribute it to the different levels. Moving further ahead is level number 4, which serves as a meeting room and sleeping quarters where they can rest or sleep. Level number 5, interestingly, is another reinforced tunnel designed to support another base, both below and on the sides of the underground metro. As you can see, there are lights and ventilating pipes running throughout the base of the tunnels. Level 6 is strategically placed as a weapon storage facility to prevent a cook-off in the event of an explosion. On level 7, you will find another storage area where explosive materials like fuel, petrol, or diesel are stored. This was strategically placed in case of an accidental explosion, and the doors are always closed or sealed, deep down where there is almost no oxygen, which is perfect in case of an explosion, as we all know fire needs oxygen. At level 8, you will find the most important room. This is where the control and command center is located. It uses landline phones to connect all layers in the tunnel. Just a reminder, they don't use the internet, so all communication is done through these offline phones to prevent themselves from being hacked. Let's examine how it would fare against bunker buster bombs like this GBU-28 when dropped from an F-16 jet. As mentioned, one of the most advanced tunnels is 70 meters deep. The GBU-28 is capable of penetrating over 50 meters, which translates to 164 feet of earth. That means it could destroy only few layers of the advanced levels. As the bomb obliterated the upper levels containing the oxygen generators and ventilators, Hamas swiftly adjusted its strategies. This resulted in the redirection or opening of the doors to another network of 1,300 tunnels. Thus, it becomes a difficult game of modern underground guerrilla warfare, moving the battlefield from one tunnel to another. We create original videos from scratch to produce basic engineering videos.
So you can see the situation that Israel is facing. And when you take that knowledge, by the way, he said 300 miles of tunnels, it's more like 600 miles all over Gaza. And the tunnel network is more embedded and more secure and strong in southern Lebanon than in Gaza. It's more extensive. And a lot of that has been drilled through bedrock. Alma Research has a lot of good articles and research on that, comparing the construction of tunnels in southern Lebanon that look exactly like tunnels built by the Kim regime in North Korea. So they're all connected together. They're all using this together. So so let's look at this a little bit. So there's a number of articles, and they're all kind of interrelated. So one of the things, this is an article that appeared in Haaretz. It's a left-wing publication, very closely associated with the New York Times. But you need to listen to what the people say. So last week I shared with you a pretty extensive article that they had done. I think it was published on May 10th or 17th, talking about the fact that there's a study coming out. It's going to be published at the Jerusalem Institute for Policy Studies, JIPS. And it says it's not likely that Israel will make it to its 100th anniversary. It just had the 76th. And they said it's very unlikely because of the different competing factions and, in some respect, the lack of money. And the money is becoming a big issue. This war is very expensive. I think I read that Israel in Gaza has used 6 million pounds of explosives. I mean, it's more than a ton of explosives. That's many tons of explosives. And I may have the number wrong. I heard the number 6 million. I think it was 6 million pounds, but it might have been 6 million tons. But they've used a lot of explosives, and they've not been able to destroy it. I saw an interview with Yaakov Katz, who used to be the editor of the Jerusalem Post, and he was talking about the fact that, Israel's doing well. They're killing more Hamas fighters than civilians, which has never been heard of, especially in urban warfare of this type, close infighting and urban warfare. But that one of the things is, well, why don't they just flood the tunnels? They were going to do that, and my understanding is it just didn't work. So now they got to destroy them, and they've got 50 tunnels connecting Gaza to Israel. And so this article says, listen, Israel's in a very difficult situation. This is true. This is based on a report from somebody who used to be in the IDF. And so they said Israel's facing 7 fronts right now. Small Israel, 9 million people, 7 fronts. Gaza is number 1. Number 2 is the West Bank or Judea, Samaria, and there's a lot going on there we don't even have time to talk about. Number 3 would be Lebanon. Number 4 would be Syria and the Golan Heights. Number 5 would be Iraq, and Iraq has come out and said, hey, we would like to help people, but we've kind of got our own problems here. 6 are the Houthis. I'm probably not going to have time to cover it. The Houthis they claim that they attacked a U.S. aircraft carrier. And they posted pictures, but then it turns out, those were pictures from a aircraft carrier fire or some other fire in a port in San Diego. And there's just this tremendous propaganda that's taking place. But look at what they have. So you have this damage, and there's a lot of damage in Gaza. It looks like Syria. After the Russians and Syrians got finished getting the Sunnis out of there to Europe, where they're now causing havoc. And I think, where was it? Someplace, a major city in Europe is 33% Islamic. And these are radical Islamics. Somebody said, well, look at all the damage. But then somebody said, well, yeah, there's a lot of damage there, but what about all those buildings in the back? They look like they're pretty much intact. So there's a lot of propaganda that you're going to see coming out about this. Now, in Gaza, so for example, look at one of these there's that Jamie Raskin article that I couldn't find. And sees what he says, I look forward to seeing 7 members of the courts act to defend the reputation and integrity of the institution. Well, there are 9 Supreme Court justices. So we're going to get rid of 2 of them that we don't like. So it's sort of like, instead of packing the court with more liberals, if Biden wins and can get them through the Senate, they're going to unpack the court of the conservatives. It's kind of a reverse operation. So look at this. And so this is where you see the propaganda. This is from the Financial Times. Rafah's 10th city swept away by Israeli war machine. Now, wait a minute. So you see on the left, here's a little bit bigger picture. On the left is Rafah early May. You see all the tents there around that open field area? This is what it looked like last week. What happened? They all left. But the implication in the Financial Times is Israel went in and wiped all these people out. That's not what happened. They left. Israel told them to move. We're going to do an operation. And again, even in the New York Times today, you have this headline that says, civilians run, Israeli troops push into Rafah. Okay, maybe they ran. They left. They were told to leave, and they did what they were told to do. And that's important. And Israeli officials have come out and said this is going to last for the rest of the year, at least, in Gaza. And we have to talk about the north in just a moment. But there was this incident this week, and of course this is the Tehran Times, an Iranian newspaper, and of course they're going to make it look as bad. Charred and live intense, 485 killed, 250 injured. Israel went in, they dropped some bombs, but now the IDF has come out and said, hey, this might have been, and I'm not going to play the video, but they've analyzed it, and the official spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Forces put out a pretty good video with graphics, and they dropped a bomb. They dropped like 38-pound bombs. And it like, this whole refugee camp burned. And so what they're thinking is that it was secondary explosions caused by Hamas fuel tanks and Hamas weapons storage facilities, which they put in the near the refugee camp. So when Israel did something, then Israel gets blamed. Now there's also this story about, Israel's using dumb bombs and they're just randomly dropping them. And this is the article, this New York Times Friday. Israel used U.S.-made bombs in Rafah strike that killed dozens. But as a CNN report came out and said, no, wait a minute, we've analyzed these bombs, and what Israel does is they dive in and then they release the bomb. And CNN says, a U.S. official told CNN, that the U.S. believes that the Israeli military is using the dumb bombs in conjunction with a tactic called dive bombing, or dropping a bomb while diving steeply in a fighter jet, which the official said makes the bombs more precise because it gets closer to its target. The official said that the U.S. believes that an unguided munition drop via dive bombing is similarly precise to a guided munition. But that's from CNN, but you got to read. It's like New York Times, CNN. You got to read all the way to the end. They usually get around to it, but they don't do it. So there's a strain on Egypt. Egypt's having trouble. Egypt's just increased the price of subsidized bread by a factor of 4, which is causing economic problems there. Israel, they're having protests about the hostages. And there's this report from I-24 and elsewhere that there's this comprehensive ceasefire plan that's coming out. By the way, here's the propaganda tweet about Yemeni forces have hit a U.S. aircraft carrier in the Red Sea. It's just total made-up lies. And this guy was challenged on it. He goes, well, I'm not a Navy guy. It looks like an aircraft carrier to me. And they're like, well, where's the flight deck? And so you see videos posted today. And this causing internal dissension in Israel. Gantz has said, June 8th, if you don't have a plan, Netanyahu, I'm going to dissolve the government. But he's already filed a motion or bill to dissolve the parliament. And part of what's going on is get rid of Netanyahu. That's the Biden. You have to understand when you interpret or analyze what the Biden administration is doing is they're trying to get rid of Netanyahu. By the way, this is proof of what we see in Bible prophecy about all nations turned against Israel, including the United States. And by the way, the chaos that we have here, if this continues, it's only going to get worse. And one of the things they're doing, so they come out, so Biden does this. I'm going to play just a minute or so of it. I know it's going to trigger a bunch of people. Where is my Slow Joe video? Well, do you want? Okay, here we go. So Biden came out. He did a speech the other day. Here is a plan. This is Israel's plan to have peace in Gaza.
For the past several months, my negotiators of foreign policy, intelligence community, and like have been relentlessly focused, not just on a ceasefire that would inevitably be fragile and temporary, but on a durable end of the war.
Well, I'm not going to play all that. It's cruel to do that to you. So he came out and said, Israel proposed this plan. This is how we're going to solve this. Israel made the proposal. Netanyahu admittedly came out and said, what are you talking about? We didn't make this proposal. We haven't changed our position. But Biden, it appears, lied about it. In fact, I've got friends who've been watching this pretty closely, and they're like, Biden lied about this. This is not what was proposed. And so he says Israel's conditions for ending the war are the same. Well, then somebody else came along to kind of weigh in on Biden's side. His name is Barack Obama. And he says this, today President Biden put forward a clear, realistic, and just plan to establish an immediate ceasefire and end the war in Gaza. And there was a joint statement issued by Egypt, Qatar, and the United States, which are going to sort of manage this if this is accepted by Israel, even though Israel says, no, we're not going to do it that way. And people want the hostages back. I get that. Dr. Eli David, good Twitter account to follow, says, okay, Biden's peace plan for Gaza is this: Israel will fully retreat. Hamas will not disarm. Hamas will rule Gaza. Now, you think that Hamas will massacre Israelis again, right? So here's the genius part. Qatar will guarantee that Hamas will not kill Israelis. A Muslim Brotherhood organization, a terrorist organization. So here's Netanyahu's tweets, we're not going to do this. You need to go back to Tablet Magazine about a month earlier in May 1st, and read an article by Lee Smith called Saving Hamas. Very important article. In fact, there's a couple places you should follow. Now, I like the Jerusalem Post because I know some of the people there, but they're a broad spectrum newspaper. You're going to get conservative, you're going to get center, you're going to get center left, you're going to get leftist. Haaretz, you're going to get pretty much leftist. You might have somebody with a center political leanings to the center get through. But so Jerusalem Post, Tablet Magazine, excellent writers. Lee Smith, Tony Badrin, David Wormser, a lot of people writing there. And Lee Smith, who's been involved in the U.S. security apparatus, wrote an article said everything that the Biden administration is doing is to save Hamas. And this is what they're doing. So you need to read those articles. Now, while all this is going on, there's a lot of other things going on in this space. The ICC has trying to issue arrest warrants for Biden. For Netanyahu and Gallant, the defense minister. And by the way, the U.S. Congress came out and passed a bill or resolution saying, we're not going along with the International Criminal Court. We don't agree with them. Look at the UN. They're part of the UN apparatus, and the International Court of Justice as well. The UN had a memorial service for Raisi. This is how corrupt and evil this organization is. So Biden says, end the war. The U.S. Congress comes out and says, International Criminal Court, we're going to sanction you. We're going to approve sanctions for you. We're going to defund you. And so what did the International Criminal Court come out and say? We're going to issue arrest warrants, if we can, against the U.S. Congress people that voted for this. The world's completely out of control. So, like I said, what they did to Trump, whether you like Trump or not, that's the harbinger of what they're going to do to everybody else that they don't agree with. UNRWA is coming out and saying Israel has to stop its campaign against its agency, and I guarantee you, the International Criminal Court is going to get involved in this and saying people who oppose UNRWA, the United Nations Relief Works Agency, that funds all these schools that teach kids to be terrorists, to do this. Now, I need to talk about the North very quickly. Boy, I could go. I always, when I get up here, I know you're going to say, I read a lot, and I get up here and I'm wondering, like, how am I going to fill up an hour today? And the answer is, I shouldn't be worrying about filling up an hour. I should be wondering why I don't fill up 3 hours with all the garbage that I have here. So there's another article in Tablet Magazine, published about a month ago, The Last Lebanon War. Israel has a problem. There's a strategic failure. So some of the things like in this article, our military establishments assumed that engagements with Hamas or Hezbollah would be brief, aiming merely to manage the situation. That's not working. And so now what we need to do is we need to finish the job. We didn't finish the job, the article points out, in 1967 when we finished the war, because this is a Pentagon publication showing the dark gray areas are areas that Israel cannot give up if it hopes to survive. So this is 57? 67? Yeah, 57 years ago. Our Pentagon was saying, don't give up the southern tip of the Sinai Peninsula. Don't give up the transition area between the Sinai and Eilat. Keep parts of the Negev. Keep Gaza. Keep almost all of the, what's called the West Bank, Judea, Samaria. And everybody agrees now they've got to control the Jordan River Valley and the Golan Heights. That's what our government said. So you need to, there's the emphasis here, minimum territory needed for Israel for defensive purposes. And they've given a lot of this away. And what does the Biden administration want to do? Protect Hamas, keep Hamas in power, protect Iran's interests, and give them even more, even though they started. It's absolutely insane. So here's another great article. So what this article says, the last Lebanon war is, listen, we got to finish Gaza, but don't forget Lebanon. We have got to win the war in Lebanon once and for all. We can't go on with this. So here's a new article that was just published in Tablet by Michael McCoskey, Israel's Great Strategic Failure. It wasn't October 7th. It's the continuing avoidance of military action against Hezbollah in Lebanon. And this is a very big deal. So go to Tablet Magazine, read this article to inform yourself about what's going on. Hezbollah's enhanced lethality, coupled with increased American opposition to the destabilization of Lebanon, which our government is doing. What do? We force them to negotiate this maritime border deal with Amos Hochstein. We had to do that. So this is a strategic failure. And there's all these rockets and that sort of thing that are, look at the border area here in the kind of blue and orange. These are attacks since October 7th. And what's happened? Lebanon has opposed effectively a depopulation zone. Look at the length of the rockets. So here are the rockets that Israel has and what they can reach into Lebanon. And they're attacking, they attacked up around the Bekaa Valley and Baalbek just yesterday. And they're doing all sorts. There's hundreds and thousands of these attacks have occurred since October 7th. You don't hear that much about it. But here are, that's Hezbollah's arsenal of rockets that they have, anywhere from 150 to 250,000. I think it's probably towards the higher side. And this is where they can reach. Look, they can reach all the way to Eilat from their bases up there. And so Israel's got to fight this. It's a very big deal. So Biden comes out and says, well, surrender to Hamas. And that's just not going to work. At the same time, this is going on. You have Erdogan in Turkey, who went to his party meeting this week and said, hey, the world, that's what he said, this is the Muslim, radical Muslim Brotherhood type leader of Turkey, came out and said, the Arabs need to unite against Israel. Nope, that's not what he said. The Muslims, nope, that's not what he said. the world needs to unite against Israel. What's the old saying? You can't make this stuff up. And what did you think the end times were going to look like? Well, they're probably going to look like this. So, internal disputes in Israel. Biden is trying to get rid of the regime. Gantz issued a thing to dissolve parliament. The labor leader, and I don't think labor's in the current Knesset there because they're too radical even for the Israelis, but they got a new leader and he came out and said, civil disobedience and don't serve in the army if you don't like the orders. And that's really amounts to treason in the midst of a war. He's saying this. Let's see here. Oh, this is kind of an encouraging news, though. John Fetterman, who I thought was a lunatic, he's a huge Israel supporter. And he went to a graduation this week, and he's a graduate of Harvard. And he took off like his academic regalia that he got when he may have got a doctorate at Harvard or a master's at Harvard. And he took it off and said, I don't support Harvard anymore. This is the liberal, like the guy who we thought was a complete lunatic. So everybody's trying to accept this peace agreement. New York Times had a big article on extremists and settlers, and it's just a bunch of made up propaganda. The U.S. is putting in sanctions all over the world, which has created a whole evasion apparatus. So you can get that from the Wall Street Journal this week. And so what happened is, and this kind of has, everybody wanted to sanction Russia and sanction Iran. And so what did they do? Okay, we'll do business together. And what it's done is it's forced them into these alliances that look a lot like we read about in the prophets. So we intended this for good, but what happened? It's turning against us. And so the oil and everything, and the countries involved are Iran, China, Russia, and Venezuela, which we really like having Venezuela here, doing this with all the Venezuelan people coming across the border and Chinese people coming across the border. And I hear they have pretty good documentation. It's about 150,000 or more military-ready Chinese males have come across the border. You need to be very situationally aware of everything that's going on because this could change rather dramatically. NATO saying, well, we're going to build a drone wall to repel Russian threats, and there's a lot going on there. And I think Biden and some of the guys came out and says, oh, we're going to give our weapons to Ukraine. And there was a big article this week at The Hill, or Politico, here it is, I think. Biden secretly gave Ukraine permission to strike inside Russia with U.S. weapons, and Putin's come out and said, we may go to nuclear war over that. And Europe's doing it. Europe's kind of united, becoming united on this, which I think is kind of significant. There's a new organization from Iran. This is published at Memory. They're saying if Mohammed bin Salman, if there's not a coup in Saudi Arabia, we're going to take him out. That's Mohammed bin Salman. So that's going on. So, listen, I could go on. You know me. I could go on and on and on. This is significant, and I will finish with this, I promise. So, Seth Fransman has a good article at Jerusalem Post about what weapons does the Gaza terror group still possess. This is an article. This is Al Akbar newspaper in Lebanon, a strategic target near Accra. The resistance is harmful. Nasrallah to the enemy. We are able to occupy your positions. It's a pretty sensitive base, and it was destroyed by rocket fire, the missiles. And then there's this other, let's see here. Hang on a second. So they published a video about it in you can kind of see the video here while I'm talking. So Hezbollah is attacking, and this was taken. They shot down a cruise missile up there. There were a lot of rockets attack, and they had missiles that got through and did damage. And by the way, Hezbollah is videoing this, apparently from the Israeli side of the border, what's happening. Or maybe they're using security cameras or something else. But this was a sensitive base. And then here's another article, training for direct combat with Hezbollah, the Golani Brigade. Israel's ready. I mean, I think they'll do well if they get in a war. But look at this statistic. This is Hezbollah published, so but I think it's pretty accurate. 40% of the people displaced in the Galilee up along the border, which could be anywhere from 80 to 120,000 people, are saying, we don't want to return after the war. Factor in all the economic costs of this. The strain that it puts on hotels all across Israel with those people. Because those hotels used to be occupied by tourists. And, I've been thinking about going over there, and hotel prices are up pretty high right now because of all of this. And so here is this. This is Sea of Galilee. The Lebanon is in green. Syria is in red. The grayish area is Israel. But all those crosshatched areas are areas that have been evacuated. And it's even more than that. And it's increasing more. And Nahariya is like 25,000 people over here on the coast. How long are they going to hang in there? This has tremendous economic things. But this is a picture. This is what happened today in Israel, because it's Sunday. They go to school on Sunday in Israel because it's after Shabbat. By the way, Biden came out and gave his speech as Shabbat was starting in Israel. Now, what does that mean? That means it's 24 hours where Israel might not be able to respond. So he can control the narrative. You need to understand, the Biden administration is evil because they want to control these narratives. And they want to create narratives to propagandize people. So this is in Israel, kids on the school bus going to school, and the sirens go off. This is typical in northern Israel in the Galilee region.
נבדוק. לא חושב שיש מישהו.
You can hear the rockets overhead. You can hear the sirens. The kids are screaming. And this is, imagine your kids going to school here in Sunbury, and all of a sudden there's rockets flying over, and then you got to get to a bomb shelter while you're taking the bus to school. This is the definition of terrorism. And Israel's got a problem. Now, I think they can beat Hezbollah, but, what are they, 7-8 months into Gaza? And talking about another 7 months in Hezbollah and Lebanon is even more complicated. It's going to be a very interesting year. But I think all of this plays into Bible prophecy quite a bit. So this is the Jerusalem Post from this morning. A dangerous escalation, a good article by Seth Fransman. You need to look it up at Jerusalem Post, jpost.com, and read that, because the North is a big deal. Gaza's still a big deal. The North is a big deal. And the West Bank, Judea, Samaria is becoming a bigger deal by the day. And the Houthis haven't gone away, and Iraq hasn't gone away, and Iran hasn't gone away, and Syria hasn't got away. You need to pray for Israel. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Let's pray, and we'll get out of here. So let's pray. Lord, we pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Lord, we know that ultimately you are the one who will come and clean this mess up. In the meantime, give us wisdom about how to occupy and live in an increasingly dangerous world that seems to be falling apart. But as we say, it's not falling apart, it's falling into place. But give us peace to live at these times. Give us wisdom as to how to act, where to contribute money, what to support, how to vote, all of these things. Give people that have children time to educate and train their children. It seems a very difficult situation that we're in right now. But we know that you are in control and you are not surprised by any of this. So please pray to help us to get in line with your plan, your program, and understand the scriptures and stay in those. And to please give us opportunities to share the gospel with those around us. Pray that you will bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.